me tell you something that took researchers decades to figure out, and that most people will spend their entire lives never knowing. High IQ is not what you think it is. It is not the person who talks the most in the room. It is not the person with the most degrees on their wall. It is not the person who has the fastest answer to every question. In fact, if you study the habits of people with genuinely extraordinary intelligence, you will find something that completely contradicts everything school ever taught you about what smart looks like. The highest IQ people in the world share 10 very specific habits. And almost none of them look like what you would expect. Here is what will surprise you most. You probably already do some of these. And you have no idea how significant that is. So before we go any further, I want you to do something. Count how many of these 10 habits you recognize in yourself. Be honest. Because your number at the end of this video is going to tell you something about yourself that you might not have known before. Let's begin. The first habit sounds strange. Maybe even a little embarrassing. People with extremely high IQ talk to themselves, constantly. Not because something is wrong with them. Because research at Bangor University found that people who verbalize their thoughts out loud process information significantly faster and with dramatically higher accuracy than people who keep everything internal. When a highly intelligent person talks to themselves, they are not being eccentric. They are running an internal quality control system out loud. They are checking their own reasoning, catching their own errors, forcing their thoughts to become precise enough to be spoken. Here is the key insight. Sloppy thoughts cannot survive being said out loud. The moment you force an idea into actual words, the weaknesses in that idea become immediately obvious. High IQ people discovered this instinctively. They use language as a tool for thinking, not just for communicating. So the next time someone catches you talking to yourself, don't be embarrassed. Be aware of what it actually means. Study after study, from the London School of Economics to research published in Psychology Today, shows the same consistent finding. People with higher cognitive ability tend to be night owls. But here is what's fascinating about why. It is not simply a preference. It is a pattern of when their brain reaches peak performance. The highly intelligent brain often requires a long runway to warm up, processing the day's experiences, making unexpected connections between ideas, reaching states of deep focus that become available only when the world goes quiet. Satoshi Kanazawa's research on IQ and sleep patterns found that individuals with higher IQ scores were significantly more likely to prefer staying up late, and significantly less likely to be naturally early risers. The world rewards morning people. But it was built by the ones who stayed up all night thinking. If you have always felt most alive after midnight, pay attention to what your brain is actually doing in those hours. Because it may not be insomnia. It may be intelligence looking for the quiet it needs to work. This one separates genuinely high IQ people from people who are simply very confident. People with extremely high intelligence actively seek out evidence that they are wrong. Not because they enjoy being wrong, but because they understand something about the nature of being right that most people never grasp. You cannot know if you are right until you have seriously tried to prove yourself wrong. Psychologists call this intellectual humility, and study after study shows it is one of the single strongest predictors of actual cognitive ability. The people who are most certain they are right, who never question their own conclusions, are almost never the people with the highest measured intelligence. The highly intelligent person holds their beliefs loosely. They treat their own opinions as hypotheses, things to be tested, not things to be defended. Charles Darwin kept what he called a golden rule. He would immediately write down any piece of evidence that contradicted his existing theories. Because he knew his brain would automatically forget it if he didn't. That habit, that specific relationship with being wrong, is one of the clearest markers of genuine intelligence ever documented. Ask yourself right now, when did you last actively look for evidence that you were wrong about something you believed? Your answer to that question matters more than your answer to almost anything else. Have you ever been so deep in thought that someone had to call your name 3 times before you heard them? Have you ever arrived somewhere and realized you have no memory of the journey because your mind was somewhere else entirely? Psychologists call this state maladaptive daydreaming in its extreme form, but in its more common expression it is simply called deep default mode thinking, And research from Harvard shows it is one of the most cognitively productive states a human brain can enter. When highly intelligent people zone out, they are not wasting time. Their brain is doing something extraordinary, making unexpected connections between unrelated ideas, processing problems that conscious focused attention cannot solve, generating insights that direct thinking would never reach. Albert Einstein described his theory of relativity as something he arrived at not through calculation but through imagination and daydream. He imagined himself riding alongside a beam of light. The mathematics came after the dream. If your mind has always wandered, if you have always been the person who gets lost in thought, understand that this is not a flaw in your attention. It is your brain doing its most important work when you are not watching. Here is one that nobody expects. People with extremely high IQ are almost universally funny. Not performing funny. Not trying to impress funny. Genuinely, effortlessly, sometimes darkly funny. A study published in the journal Cognitive Processes tested humor production ability against IQ scores and found a striking correlation. The higher the intelligence, the more sophisticated and effortless the humor. Here is why the connection exists. Humor, at its core, is the recognition of an unexpected pattern. It is seeing a connection between two things that are not supposed to be connected and understanding why that connection is both surprising and inevitable at the same time. That is exactly what high intelligence does, constantly, automatically, in every domain it touches. The highly intelligent brain is a pattern recognition machine running at unusual speed. Humor is simply what happens when that pattern recognition fires in the social domain. The specific type of humor matters too. Research shows that people with higher IQ gravitate toward abstract humor, self-deprecating humor, and dark humor, all of which require holding multiple contradictory ideas simultaneously without discomfort. If you have always found things funny that other people don't, and struggled to explain why something is funny when asked, you now know what that actually means. Most people are curious about things related to their interests. Highly intelligent people are curious about everything, including things that have absolutely no practical value to them whatsoever. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Individual Differences found that intellectual curiosity, specifically the drive to explore ideas outside your immediate domain, is one of the strongest independent predictors of IQ across all ages and all demographic groups. Here is what makes this habit distinctive. It is not just that they read widely. It is that they follow curiosity without needing a justification for it. A highly intelligent person will spend 3 hours reading about the migration patterns of Arctic terns, not because it's relevant to anything in their life, but because they encountered the subject and could not stop following the thread of it. Richard Feynman, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, spent significant portions of his career studying biology, learning to crack safes, mastering bongo drums, and learning to draw. Not as hobbies. As genuine deep curiosity that he followed without apology. He believed, and the research supports, that the habit of following curiosity wherever it leads creates unexpected connections across domains that focused specialization never could. The breadth of what you are curious about is directly related to the depth of how well you will eventually think. Ask someone with a genuinely high IQ about small talk and watch their face. Research from the University of Arizona found that highly intelligent people report significantly lower satisfaction from surface-level social interactions and significantly higher well-being from conversations that involve genuine intellectual exchange and depth. This is not about being antisocial. It is not about being arrogant or dismissive. It is about something much more specific. The highly intelligent brain requires a certain level of cognitive stimulation to feel engaged. Small talk, by definition, does not provide it. Discussing weather, sports results, or what someone had for lunch does not activate the parts of the brain that a genuinely intelligent person finds rewarding to use. But give that same person a conversation about why consciousness might be an illusion, or whether free will actually exists, or what the world will look like in 50 years, and watch what happens to their energy, their eye contact, their entire presence in the conversation. They come alive. If you have always felt slightly exhausted by social situations that others seem to enjoy effortlessly, and simultaneously felt completely energized by the rare conversation that goes somewhere real, This is not a social problem. This is your intelligence telling you exactly what it needs. One of the most consistent findings in intelligence research is something that surprises most people when they first hear it. High IQ is not primarily about how much you know. It is about how quickly and completely you can update what you know when new information arrives. The highly intelligent person does not protect their existing beliefs. They do not defend their positions because they have already staked themselves to them. They update, rapidly, completely, without ego, the moment better information becomes available. Darwin changed his core theories multiple times over his lifetime as new evidence emerged. Feynman famously said that the easiest person to fool is yourself, and he built his entire intellectual life around systems designed to prevent him from doing exactly that. This adaptability, this willingness to be wrong at scale, to update entire frameworks of understanding when the evidence demands it, is both a product of high intelligence and one of its most important generators. Because the person who never updates never learns. And the person who never learns eventually becomes the least intelligent person in the room, regardless of what they started with. Most people, when they encounter a new situation, instinctively look for the answer. People with extremely high IQ instinctively look for the question. Not the surface question. The question beneath the question. The question that, if you answer it correctly, makes all the other answers obvious. This habit has a name in academic literature. It is called first principles thinking, and it is the defining cognitive habit of almost every person identified as a genuine genius across history. Elon Musk describes his entire problem-solving approach as the refusal to accept inherited assumptions. Instead of asking how do I make this better, he asks what is this actually trying to accomplish? And then he rebuilds the answer from the ground up without the weight of how things have always been done. This is not a personality type. This is a trainable habit. The practice of asking why one more time than feels necessary, of refusing to accept the first satisfying answer, of treating every conclusion as the beginning of another question. This habit, practiced consistently, is one of the most powerful intelligence-building tools ever identified by cognitive science. The most intelligent question you can ask about anything, in any domain, is simply this: what am I assuming to be true that I have never actually tested? The final habit is the one that ties everything else together. And it is the one that most clearly separates genuinely high intelligence from the performance of intelligence. People with extremely high IQ are comfortable, genuinely, deeply comfortable, with not knowing. Most people find uncertainty deeply uncomfortable. It feels like a gap that needs to be filled immediately. So they fill it with assumptions, with inherited beliefs, with whatever answer is most available and most comfortable, regardless of whether that answer is actually true. The highly intelligent person does something different. They hold the question open. They sit with not knowing. They treat uncertainty not as a problem to be solved immediately but as a space to be explored carefully. The psychologist John Keats called this capacity negative capability, the ability to remain in uncertainty without an irritable reaching after fact and reason. He identified it as the mark of the highest order of human intelligence. And modern cognitive research confirms exactly this. The willingness to tolerate ambiguity, to say I don't know and mean it as an open door rather than a failure, is one of the single strongest cognitive markers of high intelligence measured across every demographic and every domain. The most intelligent answer to a difficult question is almost never the fastest one. It is the one that came after someone was willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing long enough to actually find something true. So here are your 10 habits. Talking to themselves. Staying up late. Embracing being wrong. Getting lost in thought. Finding humor in everything. Curiosity about everything. Preferring deep conversations. Adaptability. Thinking in questions. And comfort with uncertainty. Now, how many did you recognize in yourself? Be honest with that number. Because here is what the research actually says about it. These habits are not just markers of intelligence. They are generators of it. Every single one of these habits, practiced consistently, builds cognitive ability over time. They are not things you either have or you don't. They are things you either practice or you don't. Which means the real question is not how many of these do you already have. The real question is, which ones are you going to start building from today? Because intelligence is not a fixed thing you were born with and cannot change. It is a practice. It is a discipline. It is a set of habits applied consistently over time until the person who started no longer resembles the person who continues. And that, more than any test score, more than any degree, more than any room you walk into, is what dangerously smart actually looks like. 3 seconds silence. The question you refuse to stop asking is the measure of how far your intelligence will take you.